This is Edge of the Box, a podcast brought to you by WhoScored.com.
Hello, this is Edge of the Box, a podcast by WhoScored.com, where we cover every Premier League game coming up at the weekend. Thanks to those that have joined us for the first two episodes, and if you are new this week, then welcome aboard. Don't forget you can subscribe to our YouTube channel with your post notifications on to know exactly when each episode is out every Thursday. Don't forget to give it a like and comment as well with your thoughts on what we discuss. We want to get you lot involved. If you're listening via audio, then subscribe from wherever you get your podcast from. Guys, good to see you again. A lot of stuff to get through. A lot of stuff happened last week. A really good weekend of Premier League action. And of course, we'll be previewing every game through this podcast. But wanted to come to you first, Jonathan. Martin's asked me to ask you for your tactical takeaway from the weekend. So what was it that caught your eye?
Well, I think the most extraordinary thing last week, it wasn't so much how Arsenal played against Tottenham. It was Arteta's defence of how they played when he was saying, we had 44 crosses, which is a high for any team this season, although a long way short of the 81 that Manchester United had against Fulham under David Moyes. But it just sort of feels a very odd thing for Arteta to be talking about. That you can understand that Moyes' football is that slightly old-fashioned British style of get the ball in the box, get the centre forward attacking it. And I get why that's the thing that Manchester United were trying to do, even if I sort of feel that style of football is perhaps we've moved on from that. But for Arteta to be saying that just seems extraordinary, especially when you look at the forwards they've got. That it doesn't seem across as the way you're going to get the best out of Aubameyang or Lacazette. So it just baffles me that he started going on and on about crosses. It feels like, if you're a team that's short of creativity, that doesn't have the intelligence to play the through balls or to create the space and manipulate the opposition, to provoke the opposition, I think that's the word that Guardiola likes to use for that. Meaning sort of to attack in one place to create space somewhere else where you then switch the ball. Crosses just sort of seem the sort of the last resort. Get it wide, whack it in the box, see what happens. But of course, if you've got Eric Dyer and Toby Alderweireld heading the ball away, which they're both really good at, it's never going to succeed. So my concerns about Arsenal have been magnified hugely, not just by the game, but by the way Arteta then talked about it afterwards.
I mean, I watched that game as an absolutely bizarre tactic. I mean, a few pundits were coming out and saying Arsenal played well, but I think Tottenham were just happy to let them play that way because it wasn't troubling them. That they had all the ball, Arsenal put all those crosses in the box, but ultimately they never ever looked like that they were going to score. So, like you say, Jonathan, it was absolutely bizarre. And Martin, stat based, what was your favourite stat from the weekend's action?
I'm going to stick with the same game. I think it's everyone's favourite stat, which is foul throws. In the coverage when Bellerin obviously committed a foul throw, Gary Neville said that he felt like it was the first time he'd seen one since 1986. Well, he certainly hasn't been watching Hector Bellerin this season, that's for sure. Because it's a remarkable sort of, he's suffering from this strange amnesia when it comes to the sort of throw-in rules. He's now committed 5 foul throws in his last 9 games. There's been 16 foul throws this season. He's been responsible for over a quarter of them. No other players had more than 1. Last season, there were only 21 in total between 21 different players, so only 1 each. Bellerin wasn't one of those players. So all of a sudden, he's just forgotten how to take throw-ins. I feel like the throw-ins are a bit strange because you usually get away with the first one, I think, because referees are a bit like, I really don't want to give a foul throw-in. But he did like 2 before that were clearly foul throws. And then the referee, I think it was Martin Atkinson, just had no choice. He was just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So he just threw it. He keeps throwing it down. So 5 foul throws. He hadn't committed a single foul throw in 2 years before that. So that is my statistical takeaway. So my eyes will be glued on Hector Bellerin's throw-in technique this weekend. That's my main watching point, I think.
Do you think he's got the Yipson? Like a golfer when it comes to putting, or a darts player, or a bowler. This action they've done over and over again, suddenly they're like, oh no. And then once you start to think about it, it falls. I mean, I kind of think throw-ins are quite weird anyway, right?
Yeah, they are.
I think Arsene Wenger's been talking about this. It's a very inefficient way of returning the ball to the pitch. And I guess that's why a lot of referees just sort of think, never mind, get on with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess anybody who's played amateur football knows that one of the hardest things in the world to do is the cushion volley back to the player who's taking the throw in. There is a tendency to smash it 40 yards off a pitch. So I guess he's trying to sort of drop it as softly as he can.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, these are professional footballers at a pretty high level. They should be able to do that.
You'd certainly hope your fullback can take a throw in, given that he's been doing it all his career. So yeah, just a nice random one for this week. That was my favourite takeaway.
I mean, I would argue as a fullback, being able to take a throw in is up there with remembering to tie your shoelaces up before the game. It's pretty basic, isn't it? I'll stick with the same pattern. I'll go with the same game for my highlight. And mine would be Kane's finish in off the bar. When a goal goes in off the bar, there's just something more satisfying about it, and the way that thundered in. It was just very, very enjoyable. Had that not hit the bar and gone in, I wouldn't have enjoyed that goal as much.
Yeah, well, I think that goal is really interesting because the XG for that, I think, was only 0.12. So, as in, if he had the chance 8 times, he'd only score 1 of them. I think because he finished it so emphatically, you sort of think, well, you know, that was easy. He was 7-8 yards out, whatever. Of course, he's going to score. But it wasn't that easy because he only had sort of half a goal to aim at, and there was a goalkeeper there, so he had to hit hard. And yeah, obviously putting it off the other side of the bar makes it pretty much unsavable. Yeah,
very, very satisfying. It's a really, really interesting game on Sunday afternoon. I really enjoyed it. As ever, we have the trivia section now, Jonathan. I don't know how much you look forward to these, but it's basically all on you.
Now you're keeping score. I dread it. What began as a bit of fun 2 weeks ago has become this sort of great traumatic event.
I mean, did you have any idea that this question this week might be about the Manchester derby?
Well, yeah, but see, I thought last week about the North London derby. I revised that, and it was completely pointless.
Yeah, I mean, we're throwing you. We're trying to get you on your toes here. This week it is all about the 2 Manchester clubs. And just to pre-warn you again, I got this pretty quickly, which Mike was very surprised at. So we'll come to you now. Who was the last player to move directly between the 2 Manchester clubs? There's only been 2 in the Premier League era.
Okay,
you've got the whole show to think about that now, Jonathan. And Martin, the top match, obviously only one place to start this week. United v City. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Champions League game midweek. Again, I feel like there's a lot of bizarre things happening at the moment. Just a bizarre game. Manchester United leaving it so late to come back and not quite being good enough to pull it back against Leipzig. What did you make of that game, Martin?
I think Leipzig was so impressive in the first 20, 30 minutes. I thought they were outstanding. They just moved the ball so quickly, and they made United look like amateurs. And even though obviously United dominated the second half because they had to, it was just a sense that obviously they've gone behind in a lot of games. In every away game in the Premier League this season, they've actually conceded first and gone on to win. So obviously United fans would have been hoping that would happen again, but they haven't played a team like Leipzig in that run. So to go 2 goals down could easily have been 3 or 4 in the first half. Sure. They had an uphill battle, of course. And then when they concede the 3rd goal with the sort of the mix up between Maguire and De Gea, it's basically curtains. And they obviously had to push forward and had to throw bodies forward and did create chances in the sort of last 10 minutes of the game. But it was all just a bit predictable, a bit sort of, oh God, we've really got to push now. And Leipzig are always going to sort of start to sit back and protect what they had. So while Manchester United definitely came back into it and showed signs that they can create chances late on in the game, I never really felt like they were going to do it against a team as well organized. Well, not that they were particularly well organised in the second half, Leipzig, but just they just showed their class in that first half. And I think a lot of people were expecting, obviously from the first game between the 2, they were expecting Julian Nagelsmann to outclass Solskjaer tactically, and obviously it went the complete other way. So I think this was a really big game for Nagelsmann in terms of he'll have wanted to put that right because his reputation was on the line. Solskjaer gets quite a fair amount of stick for actually not being tactically capable to sort of win out games and just sort of relying on star quality. Whereas Leipzig, especially without Werner now, they don't really have that. So it was an incredible team performance in that first half, and I thought they were thoroughly deserving winners.
Yeah, I mean, Leipzig, one of my favourite teams to watch, quite frankly, because something happens in every game. It's never boring when Leipzig are playing. A team that never used to be boring, Jonathan, were Man City, and they're not boring now, but they've not hit the heights that they've hit over the last few years. Something that's been interesting in the last few weeks has been the centre-back situation at Man City, because John Stones has come in from nowhere and seems to be playing ahead of Laporte at the moment. I mean, when I watch John Stones play for England, he scares me. Laporte, you watch him and you just think he's so assured. He's obviously got the left-footed thing for balance as well, but Stones seems to have gone ahead of him at the moment. What's your thoughts been on that?
Well, really surprised. I mean, I sort of thought Stones was on the way out of City and was sort of, I think he's one of those players who feels like he hasn't quite developed fully. That he's obviously got an immense amount of talent, and you sort of assume that in the same way something like Rio Ferdinand did, the early part of their career will be characterised by being largely brilliant, but with odd mistakes. And then as they get more experience, the mistakes start to disappear. Well, that just hasn't happened with Stones. I know exactly what you mean. You always feel there's a mistake there with him. But he's played the games against Burnley, against Fulham, against Porto, and against Olympiacos from the start. Came off a bench last night, which I suspect they didn't want him to. Clean sheets in all of those. And Guardiola's attitude seems to be, well, he's playing well, so I'm not going to leave him out. But that seems pretty harsh on Laporte, who for me, after Van Dijk, was probably the best centre-back in the Premier League last season.
Yeah.
So, and I think the other problem it causes is what you alluded to with the left foot, right foot thing. But Stones is right-footed, so it means Ruben Dias having to go to play on the left of the two. And one of the whole things of bringing him in was, he can play on the right while Laporte plays on the left. So all that seems slightly odd. And I get Guardiola's point that if a player has been out of favour and comes in and does well, you don't want to then just sideline him immediately. That feels unfair, because he's then left thinking, well, what am I meant to do? I've played well here, and I'm binned immediately. But on the other hand, those 4 games where Stones has kept a clean sheet, 5 if you include last night, they haven't been that testing. And obviously, United, for all their problems, do have a load of quality forwards who really could expose them.
Yeah, and I guess as well, Martin, whichever way Pep plays it, he's going to have a £50 million defender sat on the bench, isn't he?
Yeah. I think, it's a surprise for sure. I think he made some comments, I can't remember after what game, where he sort of dug into his centre-backs a little bit, and it wasn't directly at Laporte, but Laporte was the man who was immediately dropped after. So there was clearly an error or a string of sort of small errors that Guardiola didn't like, and obviously he is a man of extremely fine details. So he is someone who will pick up little mistakes in games that other people will ignore just because they went unpunished. I don't think Guardiola's like that. And I completely agree that Laporte has probably been the second best centre-back behind Van Dijk for a decent period now in the Premier League. But he did have a slightly slow start to the season. He hasn't been quite assured. And I think in general, in the games that they've played together, Ruben Dias has probably stood out a little bit more. But yeah, it was a surprise that he got dropped. But I think it's one of those things where Guardiola's he's seen something that he doesn't like, whether that's on the pitch, on the training ground, but there's a reason behind it. You don't just, like John Stones, like you say, he's come out of nowhere. You don't just pick up John Stones and say, but you're going straight in now for no reason. So something's happened, and maybe it's not been clear to see for everyone, but Guardiola's seen it, and he's been pretty brutal. And like you say, it's difficult because Stones has kept clean sheets or helped to keep clean sheets in all those games. So it would be a big surprise to drop him. And obviously he didn't start in the week, had to come off the bench, but that was a real sign that he will start in the Manchester derby this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like he shot up from 4th choice to first choice, if you will, from nowhere. Someone who hasn't been first choice this season for Manchester United is Paul Pogba. I mean, first off, I cannot believe that we've gone through 2 podcasts and not mentioned Paul Pogba's name, because he's everywhere at the moment. But he's only started 4 of 11 derbies since returning. We all remember that performance in 2018, the comeback win, the year City won the title, and Manchester United went there and won 3-2. But Jonathan, at this stage, with everything that's going on with his agent as well, is Pogba worth the hassle?
No, I don't think he is. But United then have a problem because they've got a player worth 18 months left in his contract, worth 40 million, maybe 50 million, in whom they've invested huge amounts of money, and you can't really leave him out. And also, he's a really good player when things are right. And I think even the game at West Ham, he was in a really bad first half. He was the one United player who looked decent. That was in a deeper role. Whether that suits him, but that again, that seems a question that's never quite been satisfactorily resolved. What is his best position? And he never seems able to do it consistently. But I think, I think Pogba now has a bit of a problem that in this climate when a lot of the big club, well, a lot of clubs don't have money or don't have as much money as they have had. Who really is going to be prepared to pay the sort of wages he will want for a 27-year-old who hasn't played consistently well for 4 years, 5 years? There's all these doubts about who we know his agent is difficult. He's not flavour of the month anymore. There's newer stars who would seem more exciting. So say Real Madrid, and we know that Zidane really likes him and Zidane would want him. But if you're Florentino Perez and you say, okay, money's a bit tighter than it has been. We've had a bad season in the league. We want a big statement signing. I don't think you go for Pogba. I think you go for Jadon Sancho or somebody 4 or 5 years younger. Once you're 27, you have no resale value, and so I'm not convinced that Raiola and Pogba will find that many bidders in January.
Perhaps it's not all his fault, but he was the big signing. He has been the big personality in that dressing room, the one that they've looked to. And I think Pogba's just sort of lost his relevance at Manchester United now. They've signed players that can play in his position this year, in particular in Bruno Fernandes and more recently in Donny van der Beek. Very different players, but players that you all need to fit into a similar area on the pitch. And simply put, Paul Pogba's not as good as Bruno Fernandes. He just isn't. Like, he might be as good on his day, but his days are few and far between compared to Fernandes. We looked into it since Fernandes joined Manchester United. He's got 14 ratings above an 8 from WhoScored, so a very strong rating. So he's a very consistently good performer. And even when he doesn't play well, he does something. He affects the game. He might, even if it's just scoring a penalty or taking a good set piece, he affects the game. When Pogba doesn't play well, he can affect the game, but it's usually in a negative way. And Fernandes doesn't do that. He's always about the pitch. Pogba, in the same time that Fernandes has been there, has only got 4 ratings in excess of an 8. So that points to a pretty average player, to be honest. Now, I'm not saying Pogba is average. On his day, he's excellent, but that level of consistency is not world class. It's not superstar level. And I think obviously with Raiola, it's always a case of the timing. Mino Raiola is quiet when Paul Pogba is playing and not playing well, which has been quite a lot of this year. Like Jonathan says, Paul Pogba played well at the weekend. Obviously, there were the 2 big games coming up, but he played well. So Mino Raiola can say something. He's relevant again. Look, he can play. That's when he talks. He talks then, and he talks maybe when he's not in the team. He doesn't talk when Paul Pogba's playing and not playing well because he's got no case. Which has been much of this year. Like I said, he's lost his relevance for me, and I think there's a case that the rest of the Manchester United dressing room, in the past, they'll have looked to him and been like, "Okay, fair enough. You're the star man. You're the big character." I don't really see him as that anymore, and I think the Manchester United dressing room may well be getting a bit tired of this. And obviously, I think for everyone's case, they'd like to see it resolved. But like you say, it's so difficult because you've invested so much money. What's its value? What's its value?
Yeah, I think one of the other issues is the fact that I don't think there is a big character in the Manchester United dressing room anymore. I think Pogba still is that guy, so that there's no one there to perhaps rein him in, whereas there would have been in previous Manchester United teams. So we'll move on to the ultimate 11 as we do every week. We've combined the 2 Manchester teams, made an 11 out of it. Martin's picked the formation and team based on WhoScored stats, showing you flexibility again, Martin, with a 4-3-3. I mean, you really have upped it since that first week with your rigid 4-4-2. Well, starting goal, obviously, it's Ederson at the moment. I think we all could have guessed that. Jonathan, do you think it's time for Henderson perhaps at United? Because De Gea mistakes are creeping in. I mean, it feels like in a way that they never went away, but they're creeping in again. Yeah,
I mean, I think he's been a lot better this season than he was last. And obviously, he didn't play at West Ham. There's 2 sides to this problem, right? You've got the De Gea issue where he doesn't look quite the keeper he was. I think his confidence was really rattled by what happened at the World Cup in 2018. But you also have Henderson's clearly really good, and quite rightly is sort of saying, well, why am I not playing? I won a game. And I think that they've got a serious risk that they lose Henderson when he could be their first choice for the next decade. But making that decision to sideline De Gea and I guess then offload De Gea, that is a huge and very difficult decision. And it's the kind of decision you sort of think that United, as they are now, aren't very good at making.
No, I think they've got Romero not even registered in the Premier League as well on a massive salary, so they're well stocked for goalkeepers. Jonathan, I guess it comes down to, again, if they were to offload De Gea, who's going to pay the money and where would he go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they might have missed that boat. I mean, obviously there was a time when Real Madrid were very interested in him, but they've got Courtois now. They don't need him. Yeah. And nobody's, apart from Chelsea, nobody is spending money at the moment. So it's very hard to see where he could go. I mean, could he go to Atletico if they sold Oblak? Maybe. And maybe that's a style of football that would suit him more because they play deeper. They don't require him to use his feet as much, which is clearly something he has a slight issue with. But and Atletico do have money. But again, it sort of feels very. I know Atletico have a habit of bringing back old players, but they tend to bring them back when they're a little bit older than this. They're still a team that tends to buy players on the up and then offload them when at the peak of their value. Chelsea have a similar problem with Kepa, right? There's another Spanish keeper who probably wants to go back to Spain, whose form has not been great recently, who's probably too expensive for any of the Spanish clubs to buy. No,
I'm racking my brains. I mean, I'm sat here in a Paris hoodie. They're literally the only team I can think of that may be in for a keeper at some point that might interest De Gea. But it's a weird market at the moment, and goalkeepers is always a funny one because it requires a big goalkeeper to move somewhere for something to happen and for there to be a domino effect. And I just don't see that happening at the moment. We've got a back four of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who had a torrid time in midweek against Leipzig, Ruben Diaz, Harry Maguire, and then Cancelo at left back, which I don't really like because he is right-footed and he is a right back, but Martin, he has been playing there, so you've put him there, and that's fair enough. Is there an argument that Manchester City's best left back is actually at Leipzig at the moment, Martin?
Based on how he's playing at the moment, then possibly. I think he's a wing back. I think that's the pertinent thing. I think you can see how he flourishes in Leipzig's system, and I'm not really sure they found the right role for him at Man City. I don't think he ever played that badly, but I'm just not sure he's a left back, like a full back, as it were. And like you say, Cancelo's a right back, but I think he's been one of their stronger performers for a little while now in terms of his consistency. He's had a really slow start and was quite unconvincing, but to show the sort of flexibility that he has to play, he's even played in midfield. But he's played very well at left back, and obviously Benjamin Mendy's been playing a little bit more recently, come back into it a bit, but still I think it's common knowledge that Pep Guardiola doesn't really trust him. So whether he would play in a game of this magnitude, I don't know. So I'd probably expect Cancelo to play on the left, and yeah, he's been a strong performer this season. I think the main one in that back four that you'd sort of question is Harry Maguire, and I can understand why. Obviously, there was a mix-up with De Gea. I don't know whose fault that was more. Both probably equally culpable. But yeah, I think after a really poor start, and obviously he had that nightmare game against Tottenham, he did start to play well. He put in a few good games, and I think he played well for England over the break, and that helped boost his confidence a bit. But he made that slight error in midweek. But I think he's picked up again, and he's the man who does actually get in over Laporte. So our ratings, maybe Pep Guardiola's been looking at who scored, and he's made that decision on John Stones. I'm not sure.
I'm sure he's a regular visitor to the WhoScored website. Quite an attacking midfield three in front of the back four, Martin. So we've got Rodri at the base, and then Kevin De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes in front. Very, very attacking. You've taken the shackles off this team. Jonathan, if you had to choose one between De Bruyne and Fernandes for your team, who would you choose?
I mean, that's such a difficult question because they've both been so good over since Fernandes arrived in at the end of January. I'd probably take De Bruyne just because he's been doing it for longer. Or certainly in the Premier League, been doing it for longer. But yeah, I guess the argument for Fernandes is that he's doing it in a much less coherent, much weaker team. So yeah, I think they've both had exceptional years. I probably just prefer De Bruyne, and I think maybe he gives you a little bit more defensive capacity in midfield. But they've both been extraordinary, and you can play them both together. If you had I wouldn't necessarily play them both together with Rodri. I think I think the back in midfield is becoming an issue for City. That Fernandinho is what 35 now, and they could really do with peak Fernandinho back. I don't think Rodri's there yet, but he has been better recently. But I think when you look at the issues City had at the beginning of the season, they do have a problem with that interface between the two central defenders and the back of midfield. And so the game against Leicester, I thought, was really instructive when they lost 5-2, and they played with two holding midfielders in that game, which is not something that Guardiola normally does, or doesn't normally do it with a back four. So he was obviously uncomfortable with that area of the pitch, and he tried to strengthen it, tried to bolster it with an extra player. But what that meant was that De Bruyne was really isolated at the front of midfield, and so you had the two Leicester holding midfielders who that day were Nampalys Mendy, and I think Tielemans played deep that day. And they were able to just pass around De Bruyne. So the press was happening, not much later, but a fraction of a second later, that allowed Leicester to play through them. And that then allowed them to release the pace of Vardy and to get in behind City. And so you sort of see just how delicate the Guardiola system is, that it's because it's so sophisticated, the mechanisms, that it's not as simple as some other teams where we've got a problem here, so we'll shift another player here. If you do that, there's a significant knock-on effect elsewhere, which is both the great strength of the Guardiola team, but also why it can look quite fragile at times.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Manchester United's pace can cause problems in a similar way to Leicester did that day that you alluded to.
Well, and it has repeatedly. Yeah. They've Solskjaer's won 3 out of 5 games against Guardiola precisely because of that. Nothing particularly complicated. Sit deep, go over the top and use the pace of Martial and Rashford to expose them, and that is what City struggle with.
Yeah, and in the Premier League as well, it does always feel like Solskjaer gets the result when he absolutely needs to. Martin, I guess your main concern from that midfield is that you might get a call from Pogba's agent.
Yeah, I don't think he's got a case at all to come into that midfield, and I think that's the point here. That's how far he's fallen to an extent. I think obviously you'd look at maybe Rodri, the one that he could come in for, but like I said before that game at the weekend against West Ham, when he did get our man of the match award, he'd been pretty well average at best in the Premier League this season. So that Rodri's rating isn't particularly strong for what it's worth, but it's just the competition that he's up against isn't that great either. So he's the one that makes that third spot. And for what it's worth, on my 2 cents on the De Bruyne Fernandes debate, I would have De Bruyne comfortably every single day of the week, personally.
Yeah, I might get a hat trick because I'd have De Bruyne as well. Martin, we'll come to you for the front three. So it's Mahrez, Jesus, and Rashford. Do you just want to talk a little bit about that? The
main talking point there is probably no Raheem Sterling. He obviously returned to scoring form in the last week. He hadn't scored in 5 or 6 games, and then he's scored against West Ham last week, and he scored in the week off the bench. So he's coming back into a little bit of form, but he did have a bit of a lull. I don't think Rashford's been that strong either, but it's another one of those instances where they're both just not quite been at their best, and the ratings are relatively similar, but Rashford edges it. I think the sort of notable thing for Sterling against is his record against Manchester United in the derby, and even before that for Liverpool. Both of the clubs that he's played for, this is their biggest rival, and Raheem Sterling really, really struggles. He's failed to score in 20 games against Manchester United, which is a remarkable stat. Like, it's almost bizarre. But there is a sense that he had a very similar record against Liverpool until the game back end of last season, post-lockdown, when there were no fans. And I think that's quite pertinent here, because obviously the fans are so much on Raheem Sterling's back in these games against Liverpool and against Manchester United. And I think you saw in the game at the end of last season, he was excellent in a 4-0 win, and he just looked free of the pressure. So I think that where there's likely to be no fans this weekend, that could really help him. He's failed. Like I said, he failed to score in 20 games against Man United. He's had 29 shots in 16 league games against them without scoring. So there is an issue there, and he's had big chances. He's had big chances in those games as well. So it's definitely, in that circumstance, because Raheem Sterling is an outstanding player, it is a mental thing. I think there are teams that have sort of bogey teams, and there are players that have bogey teams, and Manchester United is certainly Raheem Sterling's bogey team. So I think, the fact that there's no fans may well play into Sterling's hand this weekend.
Very, very interesting. And Jonathan, we'll finish with you. Overall, how happy are you with Martin's statistical selection?
I think what's really revealing about it is where you see the weaknesses of both sides. I don't think either fullback is particularly strong in that team, and I think the back and field is a bit of a problem. That's not to say that Martin's picked the wrong players. It's to say that I think what you're selecting from isn't necessarily as good as it would have been a year or two ago.
No, very fair. Yeah, it's not a stronger side as you'd perhaps expect from a stereotypical Manchester United and Manchester City combined 11. So yeah, I think it does show, as you say, that they've both got problems. One team that haven't got problems at the moment at all are Chelsea, absolutely flying, and that's the second game we're going to look at now. Chelsea's trip to Goodison Park to play Everton. And Jonathan, they were really impressive against Leeds. I've been told here to ask you, are you warming to Frank Lampard, as if you've got some kind of problem with him? I don't know whether you have, but are you warming to him?
I was very sceptical of Lampard last season. I thought he was massively overpraised for Chelsea's achievements last season. They had two very clear defensive problems from cross-set plays and from counter-attacks. And those seemed to be a problem at the beginning of this season. And that was a real concern, because obviously they'd spent a huge amount of money. The front half of the team looked really, really good. And that has got better and better as they've sort of settled in and as he's found a coherent pattern for them. But yeah, they've also sorted out the defence as well. And that, I think, is partly personnel, that obviously having Mendy in goal, somebody who's not a hologram, is really helpful. Thiago Silva's given them a great authority, which I think at times they lack. I mean, Lampard said after the defeat at West Ham last season, he said something along the lines of, we need taller players. And you sort of looked and thought, well, Antonio Rudiger's 6'3" or whatever, and Zuma, whoever was alongside him that day, is 6 foot whatever. But I also knew what he meant. It's sort of there's like a what's the word I'm looking for? There's a sort of height of character as well as height of physique, and they perhaps didn't quite have somebody who was as commanding as they needed. And Thiago Silva's given them that. Chilwell has done really well and is clearly an upgrade on Marcus Alonso, as he had become by last season. I think moving Kante to the back of midfield, which quite why it took so long to do that, I've got no idea. That moving him out of there when he was the best player in the world at that, Sarri doing that to bring in Jorginho seemed bizarre. It seemed a manager placing his ideology, his philosophy over the evidence of the players he already had. But with Sarri, at least I could understand why he did it, because that was how he'd had the success at Napoli. I had no idea why Lampard took so long to move Kante back in the position where he's brilliant. And he has been brilliant for the last 4 or 5 games he's played there in the league. And he's been exceptional in all of them. So, look, there's a huge amount of positivity. And I think the Leeds game was in some ways the most convincing of the last, is it 10 games they've let in 3 goals now, or 11 games they've let in 3 goals? Because it was a game that sort of fell between two stools. That those previous games had been either against weaker teams where you'd expect Chelsea to dominate and to win, or against teams like Manchester United, against Tottenham, against even the home game against Sevilla, where a 0-0 draw was a good result for both teams, and both teams seemed quite happy to sit off. And so in a sense, the defence wasn't really tested in those games. Leeds are sort of between the two, that they're a team Chelsea had to attack, but they're also a team who can really hurt you on the break. And they did. The first goal, that it was a classic counter-attack. But Chelsea then dominated, and what was really impressive, I think, was how they were able to play through the Leeds press. And Bielsa said afterwards that they couldn't get close to them. And you won't find a press as tough and as hard and as intense as Leeds as anywhere. So if you can do that, then things, I think, are looking pretty positive for them. And 3-1, it could easily have been 4 or 5-1.
Yeah, agreed. And Martin, are Chelsea the real deal now? Are they up there as genuine title contenders?
I think I agree with Jonathan. That game against Leeds I was really, really impressed. Just after the start in particular as well, where the game was probably going how people thought it might, in terms of very sort of end-to-end. Leeds got their goal. Leeds were looking dangerous, although Chelsea did look the more dangerous. Leeds did carry a threat, and they'd had I think they'd had 6 or 7 shots in the first 20 minutes or so, and that tally only got to around 10 or 11 by the final whistle. So the way that Chelsea sort of managed that first period of the game and then just took control throughout, really, was really, really impressive. And I agree that Kante in particular was excellent in that game, because Kante usually has a little bit of time, but Bielsa identified that and just stuck Mateusz Klich on him, pushed Klich further up the pitch, who's quite a combative player, played him in the sort of number 10 role, as it were, but certainly not a number 10 role. He was basically the first defender, just all over Kante, and Kante dealt with it so well, got away from him quite a lot of times. And I think that was the key. I think that was the key to sort of beating that press. And I've not really seen Kante sort of have to deal with that level of pressure from basically a man marking job, and he did so extremely well. And I think that was the key to that game. But yeah, Chelsea really, really impressed me. They just look comfortable against Leeds, which no team have really to this point.
What about Everton, Martin? Because excellent start, unbelievable start, really. But you do get the feeling that they've fallen away a little bit now. What's changed for Everton over the last month or so?
I think obviously the injuries to the fullbacks have been really important. Seamus Coleman, but in particular Luca Dean, who's an outstanding fullback in my opinion. Probably, I think he's got a challenge with Andrew Robertson as sort of the best left back in the league. I think he's right up there. And I think it's interesting because obviously they made they strengthened their team very well, but it's been the absence of two sort of stalwarts or sort of mainstays in the team that has really affected them, and now makes them look unbalanced again, as they were last season. I think last season you looked at the entire squad and you thought maybe Digne and Richarlison were the star players, but beyond that, there was an issue there that they didn't have quality in too many areas of the pitch. Obviously, they addressed that in midfield and in attack with the signing of Rodriguez, who's obviously fallen off. But now I think that's sort of exposing the fact that they didn't strengthen their defence, not properly anyway. They bought Ben Godfrey, who will, I'm sure, prove to be a very good signing, but they didn't strengthen their defence. And they did sign a goalkeeper, but they've only played him once. I still think that the goalkeeper issue is massive, and it's not that Pickford's making huge errors every week, and he's not in the worst form that he has been. But I think the difference that a dependable goalkeeper makes to a defence and to a team in general is huge. I just think when you're not an excellent defence, when you can be a bit shaky, the last thing you need behind you is someone who's that erratic. I don't think there's a goalkeeper in the world who's as erratic as Jordan Pickford. He makes some incredible saves, but his decisions sometimes are wild. So I think that's an issue. I think that will continue to be an issue. I just don't see that changing. He can be an excellent shot stopper, but if I was a centre back playing in front of him, I'd be panicking in every game.
Yeah,
and I think that's a huge problem. You can't be defending in a game thinking I could have the game of my life here, but if he throws a rick, nobody remembers it. We're just gone. And obviously that's such an important position, and it feels sort of harsh to sort of pick on Pickford, as it were, when he's not perhaps making as many errors as he has done in the past. But it's just, like I said, it's just that effect mentally that you have on the team in front of you, and I think that's an issue. And yeah, the main drop off has obviously been James Rodriguez, which Jonathan's discussed previously in the last 2 episodes.
I think you, as well as Pogba's agent on the phone, you're probably going to be having Gareth Southgate on the phone with your assessment of Pickford there. Jonathan, did you ever think you'd be seeing Alex Iwobi play as a wing back?
No, Iwobi's just another one of those really frustrating former Arsenal players who you sort of see. You can see they've got all the talent, and you can also see they don't really know how to use it. And Theo Walcott, I a similar kit to. And maybe that's a bit unfair on Walcott, but Iwobi has never threatened to kick on with that potential. But that highlights a problem when Seamus Coleman's there, and I think Seamus Coleman's struck up a very good relationship with James very quickly, and so part of the drop in James' form is because Seamus Coleman isn't there anymore. So the loss of the 2 fullbacks it's been a huge force to change of shape. It's unbalanced everything. So, Chelsea, I think, are fortunate that, I sort of looked at this run of games they've got of Leeds, Everton, and I think they've got Wolves next week. There's been 3 of those sort of mid-ranking teams I was talking about where they need to attack them, but they're also teams who put on the break. Well, they're facing Everton when far from being at their best, and they'll be facing Wolves, obviously, without Raul Jimenez. So they're not going to be at their best. So Chelsea are facing teams when they're more vulnerable than they might be, which that can happen. That's one of in a tight title race. The order in which you play the fixtures can be a huge factor.
Yeah, it's one of those things as well. When things are going well, it's those kind of cards that fall the right side for you as well. So like you say, things going well for Chelsea at the moment. Everything seems to be going their way. It's now time for just a minute where Jonathan and Martin have a minute to assess the Premier League fixtures that we haven't spoke about yet. We split them in half and Martin and Jonathan go through them. And then if I remember to time them, they get a minute. If I forget, then they get a little bit more than a minute. So we're coming to you first, Martin. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I was aghast that this wasn't chosen as the second game, Wolves Villa. I thought, here we go this way. We're going to be talking about Villa, and you didn't choose it.
Is this part of my minute?
No. It's a general query.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I'm trying to save it. I'm just waiting for the opportune moment. That's all it is. Okay. We'll see. It'll come. Don't worry, Dan.
We'll start with Jonathan, then we'll start with Leeds v West Ham. Actually, we'll do it. Let Jonathan go first. So, Jonathan, when you're ready, Leeds v West Ham, and I am going to remember to time it.
I'm timing as well. Starting now. Leeds are in a bit of problems at the moment. They've only won 2 of the last 8, so there will be some concerns there. They've sunk down towards the relegation zone. I don't really think relegation's a serious threat, but they will just be beginning to look over their shoulders. However, they've only scored 4 goals in the last 5 games, which would be a problem. The goals Bamford was scoring early in the season, he's not scoring. West Ham have been in better form, but where I think Leeds can with some optimism is West Ham, since Moyes returned to the club, have dropped 15 points in winning positions. This is always my problem with Moyes, that his teams, when they have a lead, tend to drop deeper and deeper and deeper. He's only made, after he's made his first substitute in the game, the result only got better twice in his 2 spells that West Ham put together. And I wonder if that's an issue of fitness. And if there's any team equipped to expose lack of fitness, it is Leeds. So I would suspect Leeds will win this one relatively straightforwardly.
Well done, bang on a minute, as I'm sure you've just seen on your stopwatch or whatever you're using. What I liked there is the fact that you're holding on to something that as Moyes has managed a team that you support. As football fans, we hold on to those things, and we never ever forget the way they were when they were at our club. It stays with you, doesn't it?
It does, and I thought it very well to restrain myself when you were laying into Jordan Pickford with anti-Wearside bias of the mainstream media scum.
Martin, time for you now. Wolves v Villa, maybe some bias here, but off you go.
So Wolves obviously had their first Premier League match in the absence of Raul Jimenez last week, and it did not go well. The Mexican was missing from their matchday squad for the first time in 86 matches since he arrived, which just shows their reliance on him. They also stuck with a back 4, which we didn't expect against Arsenal, and we certainly didn't expect against Liverpool. And Conor Cody had a nightmare against his boyhood club. So again, it would be a surprise if they didn't return to a back 3 here. Villa will continue to be without Ross Barkley, but are at least well rested ahead of the game and what is likely to be a hectic festive period, trying to fit in the 2 games that they're now behind. They'll take heart from the performance against West Ham prior to the postponement against Newcastle, and they've now created more chances than any team in the Premier League per game, that is. The 2 sides are probably best summed up by the fact that Villa are below Wolves, but their goal difference is superior by 11 goals. Nuno's side won both these meetings by their customary 1-goal margin last season, so they'll be keen to restore normality after an uncharacteristically heavy defeat.
Again, tell you what, tight podcast this week. That's bang on a minute as well. Jonathan, you've got Newcastle v West Brom, who at this point I've got no idea whether that game's happening or not, but you may as well do it just in case it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, the fact we don't even know the game's happening tells you everything about Newcastle this season. They're one of those teams who sort of make me despair for our entire profession. Yeah, they've been terrible. There is no way they should have as many points as they do have. Their form makes no sense at all. And you were talking about Moyes as a former Sunderland manager. When Steve Bruce was Sunderland manager, it was the same thing. There was no pattern. you win a game, you'd lose a game, you'd win 3 in a row, you'd lose 6 in a row. It made no sense. It's the same for Newcastle. They struggle to score goals. They've only got 12 and 10 games to see. West Brom have the worst defence. So again, those are 2 mismatched statistics. West Brom have also been terrible. They've been worse than Newcastle. But they've also, I think, had some really bad luck with VAR decisions. So possibly a position isn't quite as bad as it may appear. But they're now in a position where they have to start winning games. There's pressure on them. This is Newcastle without Fraser, Lascelles, Ansel Maximin, Hayden, Gale, and Dubravka. So they are vulnerable. This is a game West Brom have to win. Again,
bang on a minute. I mean, I would have let you carry on, to be honest, because I would have been a little bit scared to cut you off. I feel like we've rolled you up on the podcast this week. And again, amazing. You talk about Steve Bruce there, the ex-Sunderland manager. I'm thinking exactly the same things that you're saying as Bruce has managed Villa, and exactly the same things happened when he was Villa manager as well. So it does show that a leopard does not change its spots. Martin, Southampton against Sheffield United.
So after 11 matches last season, Southampton were 19th, and they were 8 points behind Sheffield United, who were 6th. The same stage this season, Southampton are 5th, and they're now 19 points clear of the Blades, who are obviously last. That's a 27-point swing in terms of the gap between the teams after 11 matches, highlighting how far Southampton have progressed and Sheffield United have fallen. At that point in time last season, Saints stuck with Hasenhüttl. The question is how much longer Sheffield United will do the same with Chris Wilder, having picked up just 1 point from the last 14 league games, stretching back to last season. To be 19 points back on their host this weekend, but to have only conceded 1 more goal than Southampton this season just shows the sort of team that Sheffield United are, obviously losing by a single goal for the 8th time this season already, courtesy of Vardy's late winner. The bad news for Sheffield United is Danny Ings made his goal-scoring return from the bench on Monday and should start, and he's now scored more goals than the entire Sheffield United squad. I thought that was quite quick. Was that a bit too quick?
I think you had 5 seconds left and you would have got cut off by me anyway. Just talking about Sheffield United. One, surely Chris Wilder, for what he's done, will never get the boot there. And 2, either of you can answer this. Why did John Egan not bring down Jamie Vardy last week?
Yeah, I think maybe that's an issue. Maybe obviously Chris Wilder's side are notoriously sort of strong-willed, and maybe that's could be seen as a slight sign that they're just sort of gone a bit, not gone soft, but like you say, it was naive not to do that, to just say, look, we can't afford to lose this game in the last minute. So yeah, he could have taken him down. I think John Egan's been sent off in similar situations before, so he probably doesn't want to get a reputation for that. Maybe
there's sort of there's a sense of a project at Sheffield United, and Wilder's clearly central to that. I think to get rid of him would just cause way more problems than it would solve. His record is excellent. His relationship with Alan Neil is clearly very, very good. From what you hear, I suspect that Neil is actually the person who does most of the tactical stuff. But that's fine. You can have a pair of coaches who do their own, work in their own silos, and it has worked very well. I think they've been quite unlucky at times this season, but you have to look at if you sack him now. I know that the sort of a tendency with football clubs is to make a blood sacrifice in the hope that the gods of football will be appeased, but they're already miles adrift. You're just bringing somebody in so he can oversee the relegation. I don't see how that helps at all. The only thing I'd say about John Egan is he has been sent off already this season. So if he had time to make the calculation, maybe thinking I don't want to miss the next 2 games, for the sake of saving a point. Maybe that was what he was thinking.
Now time still with you, Jonathan. Palace v Tottenham.
Yeah, Palace are another team who I just don't understand. I don't get them. Their form seems to fluctuate wildly. They obviously had the great win last week against West Brom, the biggest away win in the Premier League, but that was almost entirely conditioned by Pereira being sent off. I thought pretty harshly. It had been quite an even game till then. They were really lucky, I thought, against Leeds as well, certainly to win 4-1. But then on the other hand, they should never have lost that game against Newcastle. So they're another team whose form and what they do seems to be very little related to the actual results. Tottenham, top of the league, playing really well, 4 clean sheets in a row. The only thing you might say is if Palace sit deep, as I'm sure they will Kane and Son be able to spring that trick again? So maybe they'll struggle to score. Hodgson's faced Mourinho 4 times before, hasn't beaten him, 2 draws, 2 defeats, but it was a draw when they met at Selhurst Park back in July.
Time now for Fulham v Liverpool, Martin.
So Liverpool have probably unsurprisingly won 6 in a row against Fulham since the Cottages actually did the double over Kenny Dalglish's Reds in 2011-12. Over the last meeting between the two teams proved to be a bit of a scare for Jurgen Klopp's side, who needed a late James Milner penalty to secure a 2-1 win in what was Scott Parker's third game in charge after replacing Claudio Ranieri. Liverpool fielded 3 academy graduates against Wolves and delivered an emphatic win last weekend, bringing on another in Trent Alexander-Arnold, who could be set for a first start in over a month in the league. Their defence has been particularly impressive under the circumstances. They've now conceded 7 goals in their last 13 matches without Van Dijk, which is the same number that they conceded in the Dutchman's last full appearance against Aston Villa. Obviously, they haven't played a team quite like Villa since, but that's remarkable nonetheless. Fulham, meanwhile, are persisting without last season's Championship top scorer Alexander Mitrovic, who is fit, but just isn't starting, hasn't started in over a month. So his crucial penalty miss for Serbia against Scotland might have dented his confidence. But given a lack of goals in the squad, that omission is an intriguing one. So it'll be interesting to see when he does make a return.
Quite frankly, bizarre that Mitrovic doesn't get a game for Fulham. I cannot understand that at all. The last one for you now, Jonathan, it's the Crossing Kings. It's Arsenal v Burnley.
Yeah, and how weird to talk about the Crossing Kings in an Arsenal-Burnley game, and it's Arsenal we're talking about. Yeah, I mean, they're weirdly two teams who seem to have similar problems at the moment. That Burnley have only won 1 game all season. They have taken 5 points from the last 3 games, so there is an improvement there. But they've only scored 2 goals in the last 7 games, so they're really struggling for goals. Arsenal have won 1 in the last 7 and also scored 2 goals in the last 7 games. So they're 2 teams who really struggle for creativity. They're 2 teams, I mean, for very different reasons, seem to want to get crosses in the box. Arsenal obviously will be without Pepe, who's still suspended, and also that Thomas Partey. And I think this is actually a really important game for both teams. I think it'll be pretty hard to watch. I suspect it'll be pretty low scoring. But there is just a sense that the bottom 4, maybe plus Brighton, are beginning to get cast adrift, and particularly if Leeds do beat West Ham. And Arsenal just need a win to even keep them dreaming of the Europa League. So big game for both sides.
First time I've forgotten to look at the clock there, but I have full trust that Jonathan only used.
I was 1.5 seconds over. I apologise.
No, I can allow that. No need to apologise, Jonathan. Your last one now, Martin. Leicester playing Brighton. So
Brighton fans were bemoaning VAR in the defeat to Southampton, and controversy in one way or another seems to follow them at the moment, and particularly Solly March. It was strike 3 for the wing-back, who was let off the hook against Tottenham and Villa, but saw his foul, which started outside the box against Southampton, deemed a penalty on Monday night. In their 11 matches this season, Brighton have only been outshot 3 times, and they themselves have outshot the likes of Chelsea, Manchester United and Liverpool. Only Man City have conceded fewer shots per game than Brighton's 8 as well. And no side has actually created fewer chances per game this season than Leicester. So don't be surprised if Brighton have more attempts again here. Given their standing in 4th, Leicester's apparent lack of creativity may come as a surprise, but they have gone back to basics in many ways, hitting teams on the counter as they did en route to the title in 2016. Having welcomed back both Ricardo Pereira and Jalal Soyuncu from injury, now both are back on the sidelines, but their injuries aren't serious, while Wilfred Ndidi is fit to start.
Well done to both of you. I didn't have to dish out any yellow cards this week. Excellent effort from the pair of you, so very well done. We move on now to the long shot, where, quite frankly, I made a tit out myself last week by saying that Wolves could go to Anfield, and they quite promptly then went there and lost 4-0. Can you remember your 2 shouts from last week?
Well, we both wanted to say Sheff United to beat Leicester, which wasn't a million miles away.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was forced to say Burnley against... Who did Burnley play?
Everton. They got a draw. So.
Oh, so I was the closest.
I helped you in the end. Jonathan. I stole that off you, but in the end, you won. I think a draw counts as an upset, as a long shot. I think that's fine.
Does it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 1-0.
Right, slight rule change there that I didn't know about, but that doesn't change what I'm going to go for this week. We'll go with you first, Jonathan. What's your long shot for this week?
Well, I mean, I sort of blundered into your conversation about this when I first turned on the whatever this is we're doing it on. I don't know if it counts as an upset, but I fancy West Brom to get something at Newcastle. So I mean, they can't be favourites for that game. So is that enough to make it a long shot?
Well, it's what I've gone for, so I would say yes.
Yeah, I'd say it's a slight upset. Long shot might be maybe around the edge of the box, funnily enough.
But I mean, it's kind of a long shot. The game even happened. So
that's true. Yeah.
Have you got a backup, Jonathan?
That's hard.
I mean, maybe Burnley to get something at Arsenal.
Yeah.
Although I suspect it'd be the other way around. Arsenal chucking it away against Burnley. And there's that weird thing, isn't there, that you kind of... I think it's Burnley we kept saying this about. Maybe it's Stoke we said it about. But I seem to remember a series, basically over the last decade, repeatedly going to the Emirates to watch Arsenal play, shall we say, a robust team from further north. And everything, it's going to be tough for Arsenal. You know, they don't like it up them. And then they just win it 5-0 again.
Yeah.
And I think Arsenal's home record, even against those more physical teams, tends to be pretty good. But I just don't fancy them all at the minute. And if Burnley really are improving, which I think they have been a little bit better the last 3 games, maybe they can exploit a really sort of down in their confidence Arsenal. But this is the kind of game where I think Burnley would almost be better with fans there, because the Emirates moan is such a big thing that inhibits Arsenal. That when that's gone, I think that does make it almost a bit easier for them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on with the crowd thing there. I mean, we're getting into the intricacies of the long shot here, and I don't think we've actually really gone through the rules ourselves. But I would argue there's actually maybe only one game this weekend that I would class as a massive long shot, and that's Fulham v Liverpool. But who have you gone for, Martin?
Yeah, well, I thought mine was a massive long shot, but you've not said it there. I'm going for Palace. I'm going for Palace to get a result against Tottenham. Crucially saying a result there, not a win. I just think Selhurst Park is a place that Tottenham have struggled in the past. The last 5 meetings between the teams at Selhurst Park have only seen 7 goals in total. That's 4-3 in Tottenham's favour. But Palace are obviously the sort of counter-attacking, organised team that Mourinho won't want to face. So obviously that's what he's doing at a much higher level. So it'll be really interesting to see how Tottenham approach this game. Obviously, we've got so used to the fact that they've played 3 in a row now, deploying basically the exact same tactic. Surely they can't drop Højbjerg and Sissoko into a back 6 against Crystal Palace. I think it'll be a little bit more open, and I just think the way Wilf Zaha started this season, he's a real weapon this season. So I'm going to go for Palace to get a point against Tottenham.
Nice. I mean, the good news for me after being so wrong last week about Wolves is I've picked the same game as Jonathan, so we'll both look silly. So that's good. We now move on to the form guide in association with Footstock, where Martin explains a little bit about Footstock, and then I run down the top 10 players according to the Who Scored stats. Yeah, so Footstock is a relatively new platform where you basically, it's a mixture of fantasy football contests for real money and player card trading. Basically, you can buy packs or you can trade cards with other players on the game and build your portfolio, and then you enter those players into fantasy football tournaments for real cash. And very unique, bit of fun. So check it out. Excellent. Let's begin the countdown. So in at 10 we have Mohamed Salah. 9, and I've got to get this name right, we've got Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa. And Martin, I think you want to talk a little bit about Fulham's midfield man. Yeah, I just think he's an interesting case, just because I think he was one of those signings that the club made when they made 67 signings that summer, and one who went away obviously to Villarreal last season on loan and played very well, but nobody really expected him to come back and have the sort of say that he has at Fulham. And he's really their most important player now. Really powerful midfielder in the middle of the park, breaks up play, but also carries possession really, really well. And he looked against an excellent Man City side, of course. He looked really impressive. Completed 7 of the dribble attempts that he had in that game. Also made 5 tackles. So I think he's been a real bright spark for Fulham. A real quite a fun player to watch, and just drives forward from midfield. And he'll be crucial for them this season. Yeah, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin is staying in the top 10. He's 8th. Harry Kane is 7th. Jonathan, you're going to talk about a little bit about the next man, Mason Mount, in at 6th, turning into one of my favourite players in the Premier League, actually, at the moment. I'm really enjoying watching him, but what do you think of him? He's one of those players who I kind of began to decide I would like him almost out of spite. We've all been there.
Well, just because I thought the debate about Mount v Grealish was so preposterous and so unfair on Mount. He's just a different type of player. And I thought the way he played in that second half against Belgium in the game at Wembley, I thought he was brilliant then. His tactical awareness, the way he changed his role, presumably according to Southgate's instructions at half-time. Just a really bright, clever player. He's clearly technically very, very good. But I like the way he can play, almost as an old-fashioned inside forward. He can play wide as a sort of slightly withdrawn winger, and he can play quite deep in midfield. And that suggests to me a really encouraging understanding of the game, an understanding of space on the pitch. And for somebody that young to have that awareness, I think is very unusual. And that suggests to me something's gone very, very right in the academy system. And also that he has natural gifts that his education has brought out. So I suspect that by next summer, the idea that we ever thought he might not be in the England team will seem pretty strange.
Bruno Fernandes is 5th, Riyad Mahrez is 4th, and Martin, I'm imagining in that hat-trick a few weeks ago, has probably shot him up. I don't remember him being in the top 10 before. I could be wrong.
Yeah, so he was in it last week.
Okay, I am wrong.
Yeah, you are wrong. So that was obviously straight after the hat-trick. So like you say, yeah, that game's really boosted his sort of profile in terms of the form rankings. I think he's dropped a place, actually, which makes sense. Obviously, didn't have as much of an impact last time out.
His teammate Kevin De Bruyne is sitting in 3rd. We've got James Ward-Prowse, the free kick king, at 2nd, and then still number 1. I mean, does it help, Martin, if your team never seems to play a game? Jack Grealish has remained in top spot without playing.
Yeah, obviously his rating can't go down, and it's already very good. So it'd be hard to dethrone him while Villa's games get postponed. So yeah, I think the main one that's really come into risen the rankings is Kevin De Bruyne after his goal and assist against Fulham, and he's come back into excellent form. He's got 9 assists in his last 7 games for Man City. So it's remarkable. Any other player you'd think, wow, that's incredible, but Kevin De Bruyne, it's become almost normal, and he's the first of 3 captains sort of on the podium in our leaderboard this week. So yeah, for me, best player in the world right now.
Yeah, and
even though he's 3rd in our form rankings.
There we go. I mean,
Grealish, best player in the world right now. So
I was going to say, what does that say about Jack Grealish? I mean, Kevin De Bruyne 100% needs to come into my fantasy football team this weekend. I need to find a way to get him in because I think he's going to really hit the ground running now. Jonathan, we end with you with the trivia reveal. You've had the whole show, albeit you've had to do a lot of talking through the show, but you've had the whole show to think about your answer. So, who was the last player to move directly between the 2 Manchester clubs?
Right. So you said there was 2 in the Premier League era.
Yes.
So Tevez is obviously one of them.
Correct. I can almost see the anticipation on Martin's face that he's not going to get it.
Well,
I was very surprised that Dan got it. Again, sorry, Dan. I've been really harsh on these. What is this? I forgot about it completely.
The thing I'm thinking, because the person came immediately to mind, and this is not my answer. It clearly wouldn't be my answer anyway.
What if it's right?
Before Tevez.
Okay.
It's not right. If somebody who's played for both in the Premier League era is Schmeichel, but he obviously had to spell it Villa in between. Yeah. So there's got to be somebody post Tevez, and the only person I can think of who could have done it, but I can't remember if he had to spell out in between somewhere, is Owen Hargreaves.
Yeah, correct.
Come on!
Very good. Very good. Well, he takes the lead.
He takes the lead. He does. 2-1 up, Jonathan. I mean, you've achieved a lot in your career, but I imagine going ahead in this is right up there.
Yeah, I mean, I look back to that first week, and I did think of Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. I just didn't say him, and I kind of think I could have a clean sheet. Yeah, could have a clean sweep. It's. But yeah, we learned from that. We went away and we come back stronger, and we're in good form. We've got to keep it going. That's take each question as it comes.
I mean, that's what I'm enjoying about this podcast. But both of you improving week on week. Debatable whether I am. I mean, Martin's improved his tactical flexibility, and you're 2 in a row now for the trivia. So excellent from you both. Thoroughly enjoyed talking to you both again. Really enjoying doing this podcast with you. We'll obviously be back again next Thursday where we preview the Premier League action, every single game as we have done this week. So all that's left to say is if you are enjoying this podcast, then wherever you get your podcast from, if you're on YouTube or you're listening via audio, then please subscribe to us because it really, really makes a difference. Thanks ever so much for tuning in. See you next week.